All right, listeners, get ready for this. We're going deep, deep into the world of cybersecurity, and we're using a pretty unique source, 80 questions and answers, straight from a CISA assessment exam.
Yeah.
Yeah, you heard that right. This is the real deal, the stuff that cybersecurity pros need to know to ace their certification exams.
It's interesting. You'd think these exams would be all about the tech, firewalls, encryption, all that
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
But what I find fascinating about this CISA exam is it goes beyond just the technical. It really digs into the roles, the responsibilities, even the mindset you need for strong security.
So it's like the whole package deal.
Exactly, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Question 1, and this one kind of surprised me, asks, who's really responsible for those internal controls that help catch irregularities or, illegal acts? I would have guessed the IT department.
It's a common assumption, right? You think IT, they're the ones with all the systems, they should be in charge. But the answer is actually the board of directors. They're the ones who set the tone from the top, like the captain of a ship making sure everyone's following safety protocol.
Oh, okay. So it's a top-down responsibility. That makes sense. All right, question 2 throws us into the world of segregation of duties, which is vital in any system, but especially in automated ones. But the question asks, if you can't separate every single function, which one absolutely needs its own space?
The answer's pretty clear-cut, authorization. Think of it like checks and balances. You don't want the same person writing the checks, signing them, and then reconciling the bank statement.
Oh, yeah. That's just asking for trouble.
Exactly.
It's like having someone submit an expense report and also approve it themselves. Recipe for disaster. All right, question 3. What does that mysterious audit committee actually do? I mean, I've heard the term, but...
They're kind of like the silent guardians, the watchdogs, making sure everything's running smoothly and above board. They're not involved in the day-to-day, but they provide that vital oversight.
So they're like the referees, making sure everyone's playing by the rules.
That's a great analogy.
Okay, question 4 throws us into a crisis scenario. A major incident hits, who's the superhero in charge? My first thought would be the CEO.
You'd think so, right? The big boss steps in.
Yeah.
But in the world of cybersecurity, it's the incident commander. And get this, it's the first person on the scene. Talk about being thrown into the fire.
Wow, so it's all about quick thinking and whoever's ready to take charge in the moment, regardless of their usual role. That's pretty intense. Okay, question 5, confession time. We've all used those default settings on routers and printers, right?
Right.
But is it really a bad thing? I mean, it's convenient, but...
It's convenient, sure, but those default settings are like leaving a welcome mat out for hackers. They're predictable, scannable, just not safe for a real production environment.
Okay, so it's like leaving your front door unlocked, and
Yeah.
you're practically inviting trouble. Got it. Question 6. What about emergency changes? Let's say a critical system crashes. Can you bypass the rules when things get crazy?
As tempting as it might be to just, jump in and fix things quickly, the answer's still no. Even in an emergency, changes need to go through a review process. It's like a pilot landing a plane in an emergency. They still have to follow procedures to ensure everyone's safety.
It makes sense when you put it like that.
Yeah.
Process matters, even when the pressure's on. Question 7 puts us in the shoes of an auditor. You're going through your checks, you find something concerning, but the company fixes it right away. Do you still have to report it?
Absolutely. An audit's a snapshot in time. Even if an issue's resolved, it highlights a vulnerability that was there. You got to document it, learn from it, use it to strengthen security.
So transparency and accountability are key, even when things go right. Makes sense. All right, question 8 dives into management styles. Which one offers the most control?
When it comes to security, centralized management, while maybe not as trendy as those distributed models, really does provide the tightest control over processes.
That's like having a single conductor leading an orchestra. Everyone's on the same page. Okay, question 9 is all about those fancy computer-assisted audit tools, or CATs, as the cool kids call them. They sound pretty amazing, but what's the catch?
CATs can be super powerful. They can analyze tons of data, identify patterns, all that good stuff.
Right.
But the catch is they can be expensive, complex, and sometimes they miss those subtle nuances that a human auditor would pick up on.
Ah, so they're not a magic bullet, more like a powerful tool in the right hands. Okay, question 10, digital signatures. Are they just for show, or do they actually DO some? I mean, I use them all the time, but...
They're definitely not just for show. Digital signatures are those unsung heroes of security. They verify the sender is who they say they are and that the message hasn't been tampered with.
Think of it like sealing a letter with wax. It proves it's from you and hasn't been opened by anyone else.
That's a perfect analogy.
Speaking of focusing on what's important, question 11 asks why risk-based auditing is the best approach.
Because it allows you to really prioritize your efforts. Instead of spreading yourself thin, trying to cover every single risk, you focus on the ones that have the biggest potential impact, the ones that could really do damage.
Work smarter, not harder, right?
Exactly.
Okay, question 12 is a bit of a code breaker. What's the secret code for figuring out your recovery level and potential losses after, say, a cyber attack?
2 key acronyms, RPO and RTO.
RTO.
Right. RPO stands for Recovery Point Objective, basically, how much data you could lose. And then there's RTO, Recovery Time Objective, basically, how long it takes to get those systems back up and running.
So, like, if a company gets hit with ransomware and their entire system gets locked up, their RPO would determine how far back they need to go in their backups to recover their data.
Exactly.
And their RTO would determine how quickly they need to be back online to avoid major disruption.
You got it.
That's really helpful to know. All right, question 13 asks how you really make sure those internal control objectives are being met. Is it enough to just have those policies and procedures in place?
Policies and procedures are a good starting point, but they're not enough on their own. You need a system to track and report incidents when they happen, to analyze those incidents, learn from them, and constantly improve your security posture.
So it's like a feedback loop. You learn from your mistakes and get better over time.
Exactly. It's a continuous process.
All right, question 14. Prepare to enter the world of cryptography. We're talking about asymmetric key cryptography. It sounds super complicated, but how does it actually work?
Imagine you have 2 keys, right? A public one that you give to anyone who wants to send you a message, and a private one that only you have.
Okay.
When someone encrypts a message with your public key, only your private key can decrypt it.
That's brilliant. So it's like having a mailbox with 2 locks. Anyone can drop a letter in, but only you have the key to open it.
Perfect analogy.
All right, question 15. Who gets to decide the top secret level for information within an organization? I'd guess the IT department again.
Nope, not IT this time. The answer is the data owner, the person who really understands the value and sensitivity of the data. They're the ones who get to decide how it should be classified and protected.
Put the power in the hands of those who know the data best. Makes sense. Now, question 16 throws another technical term at us. The OSI model. I've heard of it, but honestly, it always sounds a bit intimidating.
Think of the OSI model as a layered cake, with each layer representing a different aspect of network communication. It's basically a blueprint for how computers talk to each other.
Oh, okay. So it provides structure, a way to break down complex network interactions into more manageable pieces.
Exactly.
Okay, question 17, we're talking about asset disposal. You'd think getting rid of old computers is pretty straightforward, right? Just toss it in the recycling bin and you're done.
Not so fast. It's not just about recycling. It's about making sure you wipe all that data off those hard drives before someone else gets their hands on it. You wouldn't want your old computer ending up in the wrong hands with all your personal information still on it.
Oh, that's a good point. Imagine selling your old computer and someone finding all your financial records or personal photos.
Nice.
Yikes. Okay, question 18 explores database views. Are they just for creating fancy reports?
Database views can definitely be used for reports, but they also play a role in security. Think of them like windows that only let you see certain parts of the data, keeping the rest hidden from unauthorized eyes.
So it's like giving someone a map with only the roads they need to see. They get to their destination without seeing all the other streets and landmarks.
Exactly. It's all about controlling access to information.
Smart. All right, question 19 brings us to the System Development Lifecycle, or SDLC for short. Another one of those acronyms that throws people off.
The SDLC is basically a roadmap for creating and implementing a new IT system. It goes through various phases, from planning and analysis to design, development, testing, and deployment. But here's the thing. Before moving from one phase to the next, you absolutely need approval. It's not enough to just have a meeting and say, yeah, this looks good, let's move on. Someone needs to give that official thumbs up to ensure that every step of the process is carefully considered.
So it creates a clear chain of accountability. If something goes wrong, you know who signed off on each stage. Makes sense. All right, question 20. Can you create a business continuity plan without first conducting a business impact analysis?
Trying to create a business continuity plan without a business impact analysis is like Trying to build a house without a blueprint.
Yeah, that's not going to end well.
It's a recipe for disaster. You need that business impact analysis to identify those critical processes and dependencies. What are the most important functions? What systems do they rely on? What could go wrong?
It's all about understanding your weaknesses so you can plan for how to overcome them. All right, folks, that wraps up the first 20 questions of our deep dive into the CISA exam. Join us for part 2, where we'll continue our exploration into the fascinating world of cybersecurity.
Welcome back, deep divers. Ready for another round of cybersecurity insights from the CISA exam?
Oh, I'm definitely ready. Hit me with question 21.
All right, this one dives right into the heart of auditing principles. It asks about auditor independence. Is it really that big of a deal? I mean, everyone has their biases, right?
That's a good question. It's human nature to have some level of bias.
True, but in auditing, independence is absolutely paramount, especially for those external audits. Think of it like a judge presiding over a case. If they had a personal stake in the outcome, it would totally undermine the fairness of the trial. Yeah?
That's a perfect analogy. It's all about being impartial and objective. Okay, so on to question 22. This one asks, what exactly auditing IS? Is it just looking back at past history, or is there more to it?
It's definitely more than just looking back. Auditing is about systematically examining records, processes, controls, all that stuff, to determine if they're working as intended. It's like a detective investigating a case, gathering evidence, and piecing together the story.
So it's about understanding the present and identifying potential risks for the future.
Exactly.
Okay, speaking of the future, question 23 asks if insurance is really a cure-all for cybersecurity incidents. I mean, it seems like a good safety net, but...
Insurance can be a safety net, for sure, but it's not a silver bullet. And one thing a lot of people don't realize is that many insurance policies actually prioritize salvage over replacement for damaged equipment.
Wait, really?
Yep.
So you could end up with a Frankenstein system, a bunch of patched-together parts, instead of a brand new one.
Exactly.
Which might not be ideal for, getting back up and running quickly after an incident.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Let's move on to question 24, back to the world of passwords. Are they really that weak as authenticators? I mean, we all use them, but...
Unfortunately, passwords are inherently weak. They're easily captured, reused, and guessed, especially if they're not strong and unique.
Right.
And here's the really scary part. Hackers have found ways to completely bypass login utilities. Yeah. So even those password lockout mechanisms that are supposed to protect us.
They're useless.
Well, not always, but they can be ineffective. It's like having a flimsy lock on your door. It might deter casual thieves, but a determined burglar will find a way in.
Okay, so passwords are out. What else is there? Two-factor authentication, biometrics.
Those are good options, definitely. Yeah. But even those have their weaknesses. Security is a constant arms race.
I guess there's no such thing as perfect security.
Not really. But we can always strive to make things more difficult for the bad guys.
All right, on to question 25. We're exploring public key infrastructure, or PKI. Which key is used for authenticating the receiving party?
So with PKI encryption, the sender actually uses the recipient's public key to encrypt the message.
Okay.
This ensures that only the recipient holding the corresponding private key can decrypt and read the message. It's like sending a letter in a locked box. Only the person with the key can open it.
Makes sense. Okay, now we're on to question 26. And this one introduces us to a rather nasty piece of malware, the software worm. What makes it so dangerous?
Unlike a virus, which needs a user to, open an infected file or something, a worm can actually spread on its own across networks, exploiting vulnerabilities and infecting systems without any user interaction.
Wow, so they're like digital hitchhikers, hopping from one system to the next, causing chaos wherever they go.
Exactly. They can be a real nightmare to contain.
Yikes. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to question 27. This one explores the IT Balance Scorecard. What's that all about?
The IT Balance Scorecard is a framework for assessing IT performance from different perspectives. It considers things like customer satisfaction, internal processes, financial performance, and growth potential. It's a more holistic view of how IT contributes to the overall success of the organization.
So it's not just about the tech itself, it's about the impact it has on the business.
Exactly. It's about aligning IT goals with business objectives.
Okay, that makes sense. On to question 28, which ventures into the world of audit sampling.
So when the chance of actually finding evidence is low, auditors might use a technique called discovery sampling.
Discovery sampling?
Right. It basically involves examining all available sources to try and uncover any potential issues.
So it's like searching for a needle in a haystack. You got to be really thorough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're leaving no stone unturned.
Okay, question 29 looks at the roles and responsibilities of IT personnel. What kind of red flags should auditors be on the lookout for?
One major red flag is if someone in IT can both monitor system performance, A&D, make program changes without any oversight. That lack of separation of duties is a recipe for trouble.
Yeah, that's like letting the fox guard the henhouse.
Exactly. You need those checks and balances to prevent potential abuse.
Okay, speaking of preventing problems, question 30 focuses on encryption. What are the key things auditors should be looking for when assessing encryption practices?
The primary concern is management's level of control over the process. Are there clear policies and procedures in place? Is the key management secure? Are the encryption algorithms strong enough? These are all crucial questions.
So it's not just about having encryption, it's about making sure it's implemented and managed properly.
Exactly. It's about doing it right.
All right, let's delve into the hierarchy of controls in question 31. There are so many different types of controls. How do they all fit together?
Think of controls like a pyramid.
Yeah.
At the top, you have the general controls, which apply to the whole organization, like security policies and risk management frameworks.
Okay.
Then you have pervasive controls, which focus on specific areas like access controls and change management processes.
Right.
Then there are detailed controls, which outline specific procedures for tasks and activities.
Okay.
And at the very bottom, you have application controls, which are built right into the software.
So it's all about layering those controls, creating multiple lines of defense to protect those sensitive systems and data.
Exactly.
Okay, back to incident response in question 32. What's the focus of the third phase of incident response?
The third phase is all about containment, eradication, and recovery.
So damage control.
Basically, it's about stopping the bleeding, cleaning up the mess, and getting back to normal operations as quickly as possible.
It's like a first responder arriving at an accident scene. You need to assess the situation, stabilize the patient, and start the healing process.
Great analogy.
Okay, let's dive into the world of databases with question 33. What's that ACD principle all about?
ACD stands for atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. These are 4 key properties that ensure database transactions are completed correctly, data is protected from corruption, and changes are permanent.
So it's all about keeping that data safe and sound.
Exactly. ACD is the foundation of reliable database systems.
Okay, question 34 throws us into a tricky situation. A potential irregularity or illegal act has been detected. What's management's top priority in this situation?
Their primary responsibility is to cooperate with the investigation. They need to provide all necessary information and resources to help get to the bottom of the situation.
Transparency and collaboration are key, even when things get messy.
Absolutely.
All right, on to question 35, which explores function point analysis. I'll admit I am not familiar with this one. What's it all about?
Function point analysis is a method for estimating the complexity of software development projects. It involves analyzing the various inputs, outputs, and interactions of the software. It's kind of like measuring the size of a building based on its blueprints.
So it gives you a way to quantify the scope of the project, which can then help with things like cost estimation and resource allocation.
Exactly. It's a valuable tool for project planning and management.
Okay, on to question 36, which delves into the dark side of hackers can actually get a hold of encryption keys. This is kind of scary.
Yeah, this is where things get really tricky. Hackers have developed ways to remotely access encryption keys that are stored unencrypted in a computer's memory.
What? So even if your data is encrypted, the keys themselves could be vulnerable.
Exactly. This can happen through things like malware downloads, exploiting network vulnerabilities, or even gaining physical access to the system.
That's really scary. It highlights the importance of having strong security measures in place to protect those keys, like hardware security modules or multi-factor authentication.
Absolutely. You got to keep those keys under lock and key, so to speak.
Okay, let's explore the different types of controls in question 37. I know we talked about the hierarchy of controls earlier, but this question seems to be getting at something a bit different.
Right, so there are 3 main types of controls: detective controls, corrective controls, and preventative controls.
Okay, break it down for me.
Detective controls are like security cameras. They're there to detect suspicious activity, but they don't actually prevent it. Corrective controls come into play after something bad has already happened. They're like the fire department. They put out the fire. And then preventive controls are designed to stop those bad things from happening in the first place. They're like having a strong lock on your door.
I like those analogies. It's a multi-layered approach to security. Detect, correct, and prevent. Okay, on to question 38, which takes us into the world of forensic investigations. What's the first thing investigators should do when they arrive at a digital crime scene?
The most important thing is to create a bitstream image of the hard disk before doing anything else.
A bitstream image.
Right. It's basically an exact copy of the hard drive. This preserves all the data, including deleted files and hidden information. You don't want to tamper with the original evidence in any way.
It's like taking a photograph of a crime scene before you start dusting for fingerprints or collecting DNA samples. You want to capture everything in its original state.
Exactly.
Okay, what happens if an auditor realizes they missed a step during an audit? That's what question 39 asks.
Honesty is the best policy, even in auditing. If an auditor discovers an omission, they need to figure out if it could have affected the audit results. If so, they got to be transparent, cancel the report, and consider other audit procedures to address that deficiency.
So it's not about being perfect, it's about being thorough and transparent.
Exactly.
Okay, question 40 explores the risks associated with allowing unknown or unauthenticated users to access systems. This seems like a no-brainer, but
You'd be surprised how often this happens. People leave systems open, default passwords are never changed, and suddenly you have strangers poking around in your network.
it's like giving strangers the keys to your house. You're just asking for trouble.
Exactly. Allowing unknown users access to your systems is a huge security risk. It opens the door to data breaches, malware infections, even complete system takeovers.
Okay, so it's a recipe for disaster.
Got it.
Moving on to question 41. This one looks at those IT governance control objectives. What's the biggest red flag for auditors?
One major concern is when there's a conflict in reporting relationships.
A conflict.
Right. Like imagine if the information security manager reports directly to the IT department.
Oh, I see.
That could compromise the objectivity of security assessments. The security manager might be hesitant to point out flaws in systems managed by their own boss.
So there needs to be that separation, that independence to ensure unbiased evaluations. Makes sense. Now, on to question 42, which explores the concept of system accreditation. What does it mean for a system to be accredited?
System accreditation is basically getting a stamp of approval from a trusted authority.
The stamp of approval.
Right. It means that a system's security controls have been thoroughly evaluated and meet certain standards. It's a way to verify that a system is secure enough to handle sensitive data.
So like a seal of approval, a certification that says this system is good to go.
Exactly.
All right. Question 43 asks us about ways to prevent unauthorized access to internal systems. I feel like we've touched on this a bit already, but
Right. We've talked about things like firewalls and intrusion detection systems, but this question is getting at a more fundamental concept, building a strong external boundary.
okay, so it's not just about having individual security measures. It's about creating a layered defense, a perimeter that's difficult to penetrate.
Exactly. Think of it like building a fortress around your systems.
I like it. A fortress of cybersecurity.
Yeah.
All right, on to question 44, which delves into the world of symmetric encryption. We talked about asymmetric encryption earlier, so what's the difference?
In symmetric encryption, both the sender and the recipient use the same key to encrypt and decrypt the message.
Okay, so it's like having one key that unlocks both ends of the communication channel.
Exactly. And this question specifically asks about key wrapping.
Key wrapping, what's that?
Key wrapping is a way to protect those precious encryption keys during storage and transmission. It's like putting your valuable jewelry in a safe that's inside another safe. You're adding an extra layer of protection.
So it's encryption on top of encryption. Very clever.
Okay.
Okay, on to question 45, which revisits the system development lifecycle. What are some common pitfalls that organizations fall into when implementing an SDLC?
One common pitfall is using a 6-phase SDLC model. It might seem counterintuitive, but
4 phases should be better, right?
do you think so? But a 6-phase model often overlooks the post-implementation or disposal process.
Oh, okay, so it's not just about building and deploying a system, it's also about what happens afterward when the system is no longer needed.
Exactly.
We need to think about decommissioning and data disposal to ensure that sensitive information isn't left lingering on old systems.
Exactly.
Okay, on to question 46, which explores different backup methods. What's the difference between incremental and differential backups? I always get those mixed up.
No, right? It's easy
Okay.
to get them confused. So incremental backups only copy files that have changed since the last backup. Differential backups copy all files that have changed since the last full backup.
So with incremental backups, you're backing up smaller chunks of data more frequently. And with differential backups, you're backing up larger chunks less frequently.
You got it. It's a trade-off. Differential backups are generally quicker to restore, but they require more storage space.
So it's about finding the right balance between speed and storage capacity, depending on your specific needs and resources. Okay, on to question 47, which dives back into digital signatures. We talked about them earlier, but this question seems to be getting at how they actually work.
Right. So a digital signature is basically like a tamper-proof seal on a document. It guarantees that the document is authentic and hasn't been altered in any way. It uses the sender's private key to create a unique digital fingerprint that can be verified using their public key. It's pretty clever.
It's like a digital version of a handwritten signature, but much more secure.
Exactly.
All right, let's explore the difference between identification and authentication in question 48. These terms are often used interchangeably, but they actually have distinct meanings, right?
Absolutely. Identification is simply stating who you are. Authentication is proving it.
Okay, give me an example.
Sure, think of it like showing your driver's license. You're identifying yourself, and the person checking your ID is authenticating your identity. They're making sure that you are who you say you are.
So identification is saying this is who I am, and authentication is backing it up with evidence.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. On to question 49, which looks at policies, standards, and procedures. These are all important for security, but what's the difference between them? They seem to overlap a bit.
They do overlap, but they each serve a distinct purpose. Policies are like the high-level strategic guidance. They define the overall goals and objectives for security. Standards are more tactical, outlining specific requirements that must be met. And procedures are the operational details, the step-by-step instructions for carrying out tasks and activities.
So it's a hierarchy of guidance. You start with the big picture, the policies, and then you get more and more specific as you move down to the standards and procedures.
Exactly.
Okay, that clears things up. Question 50 takes us into the world of RAID systems. I've heard of RAID, but I'm not sure I fully understand how it works.
RAID stands for Redundant Array of Independent Disks. It's a technology that uses multiple hard drives to improve performance and protect your data.
Okay, how does that work?
Basically, RAID systems spread data across multiple disks, creating redundancy. So if one disk fails, you don't lose all your data. It's like having a backup generator for your information.
Oh, okay, so RAID is all about redundancy and resilience. Got it.
Ahead.
Let's look at the role of the auditor in question 51. What are they actually doing during an audit? I mean, beyond just looking at spreadsheets and asking questions, I assume.
Auditors are like the independent watchdogs, making sure things are running as they should be. They review records, interview staff, conduct tests, all to make sure an organization's operations, controls, and compliance are all in check.
So they're kind of like the quality control inspectors for security practices.
That's a great way to put it. They're the ones who make sure everyone is following the rules and doing things by the book.
Okay, on to question 52, which explores reporting conflicts. What's a reporting conflict, and why is it a problem in auditing?
A reporting conflict happens when there's potential for bias or pressure in reporting.
Okay, give me an example.
Imagine an employee who's being forced to report security issues to their manager, but that manager might want to sweep those issues under the rug. That's a conflict.
Oh, yeah. So it's about making sure people can report problems without fear of retaliation or censorship.
Exactly.
All right. Question 53 takes us into the world of digital forensics. What kind of information can you find in a dump file?
A dump file is created when a computer crashes. It captures a snapshot of the system's memory at that moment. It's like a digital autopsy report.
Interesting. So what kind of things can you find in there?
All sorts of things. Passwords, encryption keys, fragments of documents, even evidence of malware infections. It's a goldmine of information for forensic investigators.
So it's like piecing together a puzzle of what happened before the crash.
Exactly.
Okay, let's revisit PKI encryption in question 54. I know we talked about it earlier, but I'm still a little fuzzy on the details.
Sure. So when decrypting a message with PKI, the recipient actually uses their private key and the sender's public key. The sender's private key is not needed for decryption.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. The sender uses their private key to sign the message, and the recipient uses the sender's public key to verify the signature.
Exactly. And then the recipient uses their private key to decrypt the message. It's a two-way street.
Okay, question 55 talks about the physical location of computer rooms. I mean, I guess location matters, but
You might be surprised how much location actually does matter.
really?
The ideal spot for a computer room is on a middle floor, away from potential hazards like floods, roof leaks, and break-ins.
Oh,
You don't want your servers in the basement where they could be damaged by a burst pipe, and you don't want them on the top floor where they're more vulnerable to a lightning strike.
so it's like finding that Goldilocks zone, not too high, not too low, just right.
Exactly.
Okay, on to question 56, which introduces us to a sneaky little tool in a hacker's arsenal. The rootkit. What makes rootkits so dangerous?
Rootkits are designed to be stealthy. They hide in the shadows of your system and give attackers unauthorized access without you even knowing it.
So they're like digital ninjas.
Exactly. They can be incredibly difficult to detect and remove.
They sound terrifying. Okay, question 57 takes us back to digital forensics. I know we talked about creating bitstream images earlier, but this question seems to be getting at something a bit different.
Right, so this question introduces the concept of a write blocker.
A write blocker?
Yeah, imagine a crime scene you wouldn't want anyone tampering with the evidence, right?
Of course not.
Well, the same principle applies to digital forensics. During the collection phase, investigators use a write blocker to prevent any changes to the hard drive. This ensures that the evidence is preserved in its original state.
Oh, okay. So it's a tool that ensures the integrity of the evidence.
Exactly.
Okay, on to question 58, which looks at the roles of management and auditors. How do their responsibilities differ when it comes to internal controls and financial reporting?
Management is responsible for making claims about the effectiveness of their controls and the accuracy of their financial statements.
Okay.
The auditor's job is to test those claims and provide an independent opinion on their reliability.
So management makes the assertions, and the auditor verifies them.
Exactly. It's a system of checks and balances to ensure accountability and transparency.
All right, speaking of accountability, question 59 explores how auditors demonstrate their competence. I mean, how do you prove that you're qualified to do the job?
One way auditors demonstrate their competence is by clearly linking their audit objectives to specific regulations or standards.
Okay.
They cite specific page numbers and line numbers, basically showing their work.
It's like showing your work on a math problem. You need to provide evidence to support your conclusions.
Exactly.
Okay, let's revisit business process reengineering in question 60. What are some key considerations when deciding which processes to reengineer?
The best targets for business process reengineering are those processes that are broken or inefficient. You know, the ones that are causing bottlenecks, wasting resources, or just not delivering the desired outcomes.
So don't try to fix something that's not broken. Focus your efforts where they'll make the biggest impact.
Exactly. Work smarter, not harder.
All right, question 61 delves into the auditor's qualified opinion. What does it mean when an auditor issues a qualified opinion?
A qualified opinion means the auditor has some reservations about the financial statements or the effectiveness of internal controls.
Okay, so it's not a complete thumbs down, but it's not a glowing endorsement either.
Right. It's like saying, I'm not entirely convinced, rather than giving a full-fledged thumbs up.
All right, let's explore wireless LAN encryption in question 62. What are some of the key considerations when choosing and implementing wireless encryption protocols?
Two commonly used protocols are WE and WPA. Their effectiveness really hinges on the strength of the encryption keys, just like having a strong password is crucial for your online accounts.
So it's all about those keys. Make them long, complex, and unique.
Exactly.
Okay, let's revisit business continuity planning in question 63. What's a common mistake organizations make when developing their business continuity plans?
One common mistake is skipping the business impact analysis.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is it so important? I mean, it seems like you could just jump right into planning, right?
You could, but the business impact analysis is crucial for identifying those critical processes and dependencies.
Okay, so it's about understanding what's essential for the business to function. What systems and processes are absolutely vital.
Exactly. Without that understanding, your business continuity plan is built on shaky ground. It's like trying to build a house without knowing the soil conditions.
Yeah, you might end up with a disaster. All right, on to question 64, which introduces us to the world of expert systems. What are expert systems and how are they used in business and technology?
Expert systems are AI systems that use a knowledge base and rules to simulate the decision-making abilities of a human expert.
Oh, wow. So they're like having a digital consultant on hand.
Exactly. They're often used in fields like medicine or finance to provide guidance for complex decisions.
Okay, that's pretty cool. On to question 65, which explores two-factor authentication. I know we talked about passwords earlier, but what are some other ways to authenticate users and protect accounts?
One common method is using digital certificates, also known as soft tokens. They provide a digital form of identification that can be used to verify a user's identity and grant access to systems. It's like having a digital passport for your online accounts.
Oh, okay. So instead of just relying on something, like a password, you're also using something, you have like a digital certificate.
Exactly. It adds that extra layer of security.
Okay, let's look at detective controls in question 66. What are some examples of detective controls that organizations use to monitor for security breaches?
One example is auditing system configuration and log files.
What are those?
System configuration files contain information about how systems are set up and configured, and log files record events and activities that happen on those systems.
Yeah.
Auditors review these records to spot any unusual activity or potential breaches. It's like reviewing security camera footage after a break-in to see what happened.
Okay, so it's about looking for clues after the fact. Got it. On to question 67, which delves back into audit sampling. I know we talked about discovery sampling earlier, but this question introduces another sampling method, haphazard sampling.
Right, so haphazard sampling, also known as judgmental sampling, is a non-statistical approach where the auditor uses their professional judgment to select sample items.
So it's more subjective than, say, random sampling, where you're using a random number generator or some other method to ensure that every item has an equal chance of being selected.
Exactly. With haphazard sampling, the auditor is using their experience and expertise to choose items that they believe are most likely to reveal potential issues. It's often used to focus on specific areas or transactions that might be more prone to errors.
Okay, so it's a more targeted approach, focusing on the areas of highest risk. Makes sense. Let's talk about firewall configurations in question 68. What's a common mistake that organizations make when configuring their firewalls?
One big no-no is leaving backup media in a firewall's drive.
Why is that a problem? I mean, it seems like a convenient place to store backups.
It might seem convenient, but it's a huge security risk. It's like leaving the keys to your castle hanging on the front door. Attackers could gain access to sensitive configuration information and potentially even modify the firewall settings.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's a rookie mistake you definitely want to avoid. Keep those backups separate from your firewall. Got it. On to question 69, which explores the Agile programming methodology. What's Agile all about, and how does it differ from traditional software development approaches?
Agile programming is all about flexibility and collaboration. It's an iterative approach to software development that emphasizes customer feedback, rapid prototyping, and adapting to change.
So it's a more dynamic and responsive approach than traditional waterfall methods, where you have these long, drawn-out phases, and it's difficult to make changes once you're down the road.
Exactly. Agile is all about being nimble and responsive to evolving needs. It's perfect for projects where requirements are likely to change, or where you need to get something up and running quickly.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's talk about ethical dilemmas in auditing in question 70. What are some situations where auditors might face ethical challenges?
One common dilemma is dealing with gifts or favors from the auditee.
Oh, yeah, I can see how that could be tricky.
It's important for auditors to maintain their independence and objectivity, so they should avoid accepting anything that could compromise their professional judgment. Even something as simple as a free lunch could create a perception of bias.
Okay, so always err on the side of caution. Better safe than sorry. Now, on to question 71, which addresses situations involving illegal or inappropriate acts. What happens if an auditor uncovers something really serious, like fraud or embezzlement?
If an auditor uncovers an illegal or inappropriate act, especially one involving individuals responsible for governance, they have a duty to report it to the appropriate authorities.
So it's not just about reporting it within the organization. It might also involve going outside to law enforcement or regulatory bodies.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. You got to do the right thing, even if it's uncomfortable. Question 72 explores the purpose of an audit charter. I've heard the term before, but I'm not sure I fully understand what it is.
The audit charter is like a contract between the auditor and the organization being audited. It outlines the auditor's responsibilities, authority, and scope of work.
So it's like setting the ground rules for the engagement, making sure everyone is on the same page from the outset.
Exactly. It helps to avoid misunderstandings and ensures that the audit is conducted fairly and effectively.
Okay, on to question 73, which delves into the world of privileged access accounts. What are privileged access accounts, and why are they so important from a security perspective?
Privileged access accounts have elevated permissions that allow them to access sensitive systems and data.
Oh, okay, so these are like the super user accounts that have the keys to the kingdom.
Exactly. They can do things like create and delete user accounts, install software, modify system configurations, all sorts of powerful stuff.
So it's crucial to protect these accounts and make sure they're done.
And we're back for the final stretch of our cybersecurity deep dive. We've tackled a ton of CISA exam questions, but we've got one more waiting for us.
This last one brings up a type of audit tool we haven't talked about yet, a parallel simulation.
Okay, color me intrigued. What is a parallel simulation and how does it work?
Well, it's a pretty clever technique. Basically, auditors create their own software to process data, running it alongside the company's system. Then they compare the results.
So it's like an independent verification process, double-checking the company's math, but on a much larger scale.
You got it.
That's fascinating. Well, folks, we've officially made it to the end of our CISA question marathon. What a journey. I know, right? We've uncovered those hidden responsibilities, decoded all that technical jargon, and explored the tools and strategies that are out there protecting our digital world.
I feel like I've learned so much,
Yeah?
but I also realize just how much more there is to know about this ever-evolving field of cybersecurity.
That's the thing about cybersecurity. It's a constant learning process. The threats are always changing, so we got to stay ahead of the game, you know?
Absolutely. So before we wrap up, any key takeaways our listeners should remember as they continue on their own cybersecurity adventures?
First and foremost, remember that security is everyone's responsibility. It's not just about the IT department. Everyone in an organization has a role to play in protecting sensitive information.
So true. And don't forget those checks and balances. Segregation of duties is vital, even in small organizations. Oh, and those default settings, change them. Make it harder for those hackers, right?
Absolutely. And another thing, don't fall into that trap of thinking you're too small or insignificant to be a target. Cybercriminals are opportunistic. They'll exploit any weakness they can find.
So vigilance is key. Stay alert, stay informed. What's one final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
In today's world, cybersecurity is no longer just a technical issue, it's a business imperative. It's about protecting your data, your reputation, and ultimately your bottom line. So stay informed, stay vigilant, and remember, the best defense is a good offense.
Wise words. Well, thanks for joining us on this cybersecurity deep dive. We hope you've gained valuable insights and that you'll keep exploring this ever-changing field. Until next time, stay safe out there in the digital world.